Mara stepped off the old bus with a slow breath, feeling the warm Dust Creek air move across her face like a memory she wasn't ready to relive. The sun was the same as she remembered, bright, stubborn, and unchanging, but everything inside her felt different. She had left this place years ago with a heart full of confusion and fear. Now she had returned with a calm determination, telling herself she was strong enough to face the past she once ran from. Dust Creek hadn't changed much. The wooden buildings still lined the single road through town. The same dust rose under every passing truck, and the same smell of hay and old earth hung in the air. It was the kind of town that felt frozen in time, where everyone knew everyone else's stories, secrets, mistakes, and triumphs. Mara wondered how many people still remembered hers. As she carried her small suitcase down the quiet street, she felt the familiar pull of old memories. She passed Mr. Bennett's general store, where she used to buy cold lemonade after school. She passed the tiny post office her mother visited every Monday morning. She even passed the old bench behind the feed store where she had once sat for hours dreaming about a bigger life somewhere far away. And, of course, she thought about him, Colt Avery. Colt had been a big part of Dust Creek for as long as she could remember. Everyone talked about him, not because he liked attention, but because he worked harder than most men, twice his age. He grew up on the Avery ranch land so old that people said the soil remembered stories from before the town even existed. Mara remembered the way he carried himself. Calm, but firm, like he understood more about life than most people ever would. He didn't talk much, but when he did, his words stayed with you. He had stayed in Dust Creek when she left. He had stayed and lived the same simple, hard-working life. That thought made Mara's stomach twist, because she didn't know how he would react to seeing her again or if she was even ready for it. As Mara approached the small inn at the edge of town, she tried to keep her steps light, but her heart was heavy. She told herself she came back to find peace, not to stir up old feelings. She wanted to settle things, to understand what had happened between her and Colt all those years ago, to stop the quiet ache she carried inside her. She wasn't expecting forgiveness or even a warm welcome. She only wanted clarity. The innkeeper, Mrs. Dalton, recognized her the moment she walked through the door. A warm smile spread across the older woman's face, and she reached out as if greeting a long-lost daughter. "Well, my goodness, Mara Hayes," Mrs. Dalton said softly. "I never thought I'd see you back here." Mara returned the smile, though it felt a bit shaky. "It's good to see you, Mrs. Dalton. You've been gone a long time," Mrs. Dalton continued, handing her a room key. "Dust Creek missed you. And, well, some folks missed you more than others." Mara pretended not to understand, but her cheeks warmed. She thanked Mrs. Dalton and headed up to her room, trying to stay focused. She had told herself she would take everything slowly. She wasn't here to reopen wounds or start trouble. She wanted to breathe, think, and understand. Later that afternoon, she took a walk toward the edge of town where the open fields began. The golden grass swayed gently in the breeze, brushing against her legs as she walked. She felt calmer here, away from the eyes of curious townspeople. The sky stretched wide above her, matching the quiet in her heart. She remembered walking this same path years ago with Colt. He had shown her how to read the land, the weather, the soil, the wind. He had always believed that understanding the land meant understanding life. Mara never fully grasped what he meant, but she remembered the peaceful look in his eyes as he explained it. Colt wasn't gentle with his words, but he wasn't cruel either. He was simply honest, shaped by a hard life that rarely gave him reasons to be soft. As she reached the old wooden fence that marked the Avery ranch, Mara hesitated. Part of her wanted to turn back. Another part of her wanted to keep walking until she found him, until she could look him in the eyes and say everything she had kept inside for years. She rested her hands on the weathered fence rail, tracing the cracks in the wood. Behind her, she heard the soft crunch of footsteps on the dry ground. Her heart leapt, and she knew, without turning, who it was. The air around her felt different, heavier, warmer, familiar. "Mara?" a deep voice asked quietly. She turned slowly, her chest tightening at the sight of him. Colt Avery stood a few feet away, wearing the same worn boots, the same faded shirt, and the same look of steady calm. But he looked older now, older in a way that wasn't unkind, just real. His eyes were the same deep, thoughtful shade she remembered, but there was something softer in them now. Something tired, but peaceful. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The wind moved around them, carrying the faint smell of hay and warm earth. Mara finally found her voice, though it came out smaller than she intended. "Hello, Colt." He nodded slightly, his eyes never leaving hers. "Didn't expect to see you here." I didn't expect it either," she admitted. Another quiet moment passed. Colt looked like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the right words. Mara felt the same way. They had left too much unsaid in the past. Words felt heavy now, like they carried years of unspoken meaning. "You came back," Colt finally said, his tone thoughtful, rather than surprised. "Yes," she said softly. "I needed to." He took a small step closer, his voice low but steady. "Is everything all right?" Mara hesitated. She didn't want to burden him with her troubles, but she also didn't want to pretend she came back for simple reasons. She met his eyes, trying to show him honesty. "I came back to understand things," she said. "About myself. About the past. About everything." Colt studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable but not unkind. He seemed to understand more than she said, the way he always did. "Dust Creek can be hard," he murmured. "It can bring back things you thought were gone." Mara nodded slowly. "I know. That's why I came." He looked at her with a mix of surprise and something softer, maybe respect, maybe concern. "You're brave to come back." She gave a quiet laugh. "I don't feel brave." "Well," Colt said, looking out toward the fields, "sometimes the bravest thing is just showing up." The warmth in his voice startled her. He had never spoken like that before. Not back when they were younger. Not when everything was confusing and heavy between them. She felt something shift in her chest. A small opening she wasn't expecting. Colt glanced back at her, his eyes gentle in a way she didn't remember. "It's good to see you, Mara." She breathed out slowly. "It's good to see you too." For the first time since she arrived, Mara felt a small sense of calm. She wasn't sure where things would go from here or how the rest of her time in Dust Creek would unfold, but standing there with Colt, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. She didn't come back for romance or for old feelings. She came back for understanding, for healing, for clarity. And as the sun dipped lower over the Avery Ranch, painting the fields with warm light, Mara felt like maybe, just maybe, she was finally in the right place to find all of that. Mara woke up early the next morning, long before the sun had fully risen. The soft morning light slipped through the thin curtains of the small inn room, casting gentle shadows across the wooden floor. She lay still for a moment, listening to the quiet of Dust Creek. The silence here was different from the city silence she had grown used to. This silence had a heartbeat, a slow, steady rhythm of wind, distant animals, and the creak of old buildings. It reminded her of childhood mornings she used to take for granted. As she sat up, her thoughts drifted immediately to Colt. Their meeting the day before played in her mind like an unfinished song. She had expected him to be cold or distant, maybe even irritated at seeing her again after so many years. But instead, he had looked at her with calm eyes. Not angry, not accusing, just steady, thoughtful, and a little surprised. It confused her in a way she couldn't explain. She dressed slowly, wanting to walk before the town woke up. The morning air felt fresh as she stepped outside, carrying a quiet sense of possibility. Dust Creek always looked peaceful at sunrise. The wooden buildings glowed softly under the warm light, and the fields beyond the town looked endless and calm. Mara breathed deeply, filling her lungs with the familiar scent of hay, warm dust, and morning wind. As she walked down the road, a few early risers waved to her. Some looked at her with curiosity, others with faint recognition. They knew her name, knew parts of her story, and probably had their own thoughts about why she had suddenly returned. But she didn't care what they thought. She knew why she was here, and that was enough. She made her way toward the general store, where Mr. Bennet was setting out crates of fruit for the day. He stopped mid-motion when he saw her, surprise spreading across his weathered face. "Mara Hayes," he said with a gentle chuckle. "Well, I'll be." "It's good to see you, Mr. Bennet," Mara replied with a small smile. He nodded toward her as he wiped his hands on his apron. "Your mother used to bring you here every Saturday. You'd always run straight to the lemonade jars." Mara laughed lightly. "I remember." Mr. Bennet's eyes softened. "Your mother would be glad to know you're back." The comment warmed her chest, filling her with a longing she didn't expect. Her mother had passed away a few years earlier. Mara had avoided Dust Creek since then because coming back without her mother felt too painful. Now that she was here, the memories felt bittersweet, but somehow comforting. After chatting with Mr. Bennet for a few minutes, she bought a bottle of lemonade, more for the memory than the taste, and continued walking. Her heart felt unsettled, as if something inside her kept turning over, searching for balance. She found herself drawn back toward the fields near the Avery Ranch. The fresh smell of cut grass and warm earth welcomed her like an old friend. She walked slowly, letting the wind brush her hair and sunlight warm her shoulders. She told herself she wasn't going there to see Colt, but deep down, she knew she hoped to. As she neared the fence line again, she saw Colt walking along the edge of the field with a small bucket in hand. He looked focused, checking the ground and the fence posts as he moved. He didn't notice her at first. Mara hesitated, unsure whether she should greet him or simply turn back. But she had come here to face the past, not hide from it. She walked forward until her footsteps caught his attention. Colt looked up, and his expression softened immediately when he recognized her. "Morning," he said with a nod. "Good morning," Mara replied, her voice calm. He took a moment to study her, as if making sure she was really there. "Didn't expect to see you out this early." "Oh, I woke up with a lot on my mind," she admitted. He gave a small, understanding tilt of his head. "Dust Creek will do that." She stepped closer to the fence, placing her hands on the wooden rail. Colt came to stand a few feet away, close enough that she could see the small lines near his eyes. Lines from years of sun, work, and quiet thoughts. For a few moments, they simply stood there, listening to the wind moving through the tall grass. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, but it was full of things they hadn't talked about yet. Finally, Mara took a deep breath. "Colt, there are things I need to say." His expression remained calm, but there was a quiet seriousness in his eyes. "All right." "Ow. Ow. I didn't leave Dust Creek because I wanted to forget it," she began carefully. "I left because I didn't understand myself back then, and I felt like everything here was pushing me to be someone I wasn't ready to be." Colt listened without interrupting. He had always been like that, quiet, patient, giving space for others to speak. "I felt like I disappointed people," Mara continued softly. "Especially you." Colt looked surprised by her words, but not upset. His voice was gentle when he replied, "You never disappointed me." 8. She met his eyes, searching for any sign of discomfort or dishonesty. But all she saw was sincerity. "You were always harder on yourself than anyone else," he said. "I tried to tell you that, but I didn't know how to say it right." Mara swallowed, her throat tight but not painful. He nodded slowly. "I know. I wasn't good with soft words. Still not. That's not what I needed at the time, Mara said gently. I needed someone to understand me. But I think you were trying to help in your own way. Colt leaned against the fence, his eyes thoughtful. I thought being strong meant being quiet and tough. I didn't know how to show the gentler parts. Didn't think they mattered. Mara's heart softened at his honesty. She could feel the sincerity in every word he spoke. They matter more than you think. Colt looked down for a moment, his thumb brushing the rough wood of the fence. I didn't mean to hurt you, Mara. Her breath caught lightly. Hearing those words from him felt like a piece of her heart gently settling back into place. I know, she said quietly. And I'm not here to blame you. I just want to understand everything clearly now. Colt nodded, looking relieved but also reflective. I always thought you left because of something I did. She shook her head gently. You didn't make me leave. I left because I didn't know how to face myself. And facing you felt like facing every fear I had. Colt's eyes lifted slowly, meeting hers with a calm, steady warmth. You're facing it now. Yes, she said with a soft smile. I am. They stood silently again, but this time the silence felt lighter, like a soft field breeze rather than a heavy weight. Colt finally spoke in a thoughtful tone. Sometimes life teaches us lessons in rough ways. I thought that was the only way people learned. Mara nodded. Maybe it works for some people. But I needed understanding, not pressure. He listened carefully to every word, as if memorizing them. I'm different now, Mara continued. And I think you are too. Colt looked out across the field, the sunlight catching in his hair. I guess life teaches all of us different things along the way. She smiled gently. I think we both learned how to be softer. He looked at her again, his eyes warm. Maybe so. Mara felt something shift inside her, a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. The past didn't feel sharp anymore. It felt like a story she could finally look at without fear. Colt took a slow breath, then spoke with quiet sincerity. If there's anything you want to ask me, anything you want to talk about, I'm here now. Mara nodded, her heart warm. Thank you, Colt. That means more than you know. They stood together in the golden morning light. Two people who had once walked away from each other, now finding their way back. Not to romance, but to understanding, clarity, and healing. And as the breeze moved softly around them, Mara felt certain she had made the right choice by returning to Dust Creek. She wasn't done healing yet, and the past still held pieces she needed to sort through. But for the first time, she felt she wasn't doing it alone. Colt wasn't a memory anymore, he was a real presence again, steady and quietly supportive in the way only he could be. And somehow, that made all the difference. The days following Mara's return moved in a slow, thoughtful rhythm. Dust Creek seemed to breathe differently now that she was back, as though the town itself noticed her presence and welcomed her quietly. Each morning, she found herself drawn toward the wide fields and the open sky, and each afternoon, she realized she wasn't avoiding her memories anymore. She was walking straight into them. By the third day, she found herself near the Avery Ranch again. Part of her felt unsure about showing up there so often, but the other part knew she wasn't coming for silly reasons. There were things she needed to understand, things she had carried for too many years. And Colt seemed willing to help her find the clarity she was searching for. That morning, the sun lay warm across the earth, and a gentle breeze moved through the tall grass like soft waves. Mara followed the path she remembered from her childhood, the one that wound behind the old barn and led to the edge of Colt's family land. The barn looked almost the same as it had years ago, with its faded red paint and a few loose boards that creaked when the wind blew. It was a comforting sight, a reminder that some things didn't have to change to still have meaning. She saw Colt near the barn, repairing a broken section of the fence. He worked quietly, his movements steady and practiced. He didn't need to turn around to know she was there. Somehow, he just sensed it. "You're back early today," he said, without looking up, a light smile in his voice. Mara stepped closer, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Couldn't sleep much. The morning felt peaceful. I thought I'd walk." Lo. Colt straightened after hammering a nail into the wood, and finally turned to look at her. His eyes were warm, calm in that familiar way that made her feel both unsettled and comforted at the same time. "Dust Creek still gets to you, doesn't it?" he asked. "I think it always did," she said softly. Colt nodded and rested his arm on the fence. "You want to walk down to the pasture? I've got to check the horses." Mara hesitated for a moment but then nodded. "Sure." They walked side by side, not too close, not too far, just comfortably. The earth under their feet felt soft, worn by years of footsteps. The horses grazed peacefully in a wide green field, their tails swaying gently as they moved. Mara remembered visiting this pasture as a teenager, always amazed by how calm animals could be around Colt. They trusted him. It was a trust he never asked for, but naturally earned. Colt stopped near the gate and watched one of the horses trot toward him. "This here is Sage," he said. "She came to us weak and scared a couple years ago. Took her months to trust anyone. She looks strong now," Mara said as she watched the horse move gracefully across the grass. "She is." Colt smiled faintly. But it wasn't strength she needed. She needed patience. A calm voice. Someone to show her the world wasn't always as hard as she thought. Mara looked at him, feeling the unspoken message in his words. "You think that's true for people too?" she asked softly. Colt met her eyes. "I think everyone needs something different. Some need challenge. Some need calm. Some need time." "And what did you need?" she asked, before she could stop herself. Colt paused, looking out across the field as if searching for an answer in the horizon. "I needed the land," he said quietly. "It taught me everything I know. It taught me to endure, to stay steady, to keep going, even when life feels heavy." Mara listened carefully, sensing the depth behind his words. She had always known Colt was shaped by his life here. Dust Creek had never been an easy place. It was beautiful, yes, but it demanded strength, routine, and commitment. "You always looked like you understood the world better than everyone else," she murmured. Colt gave a soft, almost shy laugh. "I didn't. Still don't. I just paid attention to the things around me. This land, it doesn't give anything for free. You have to work for every harvest, every bit of progress." He turned toward her, his expression thoughtful. "I guess that's why I expected people to be the same. I thought everyone needed tough lessons to grow. But I was wrong. Not everyone learns that way." Mara felt her chest warm at his honesty. "You weren't wrong," she said gently. "You just learned things one way. I learned them another." Colt nodded slowly. "Maybe. But I should have known you needed something different." Mara took a small step closer. Close enough to really see the tired lines around his eyes. "I didn't even know what I needed back then. So, how could you?" Colt's gaze softened. "You were young. You were hurting in ways you didn't know how to explain, and I didn't give you enough space to feel safe." Mara looked down at the ground, feeling old emotions rise in her chest. "I was scared," she admitted. "Scared of leaving, scared of staying, scared of myself, and scared of disappointing you." Colt's breath caught slightly, but he didn't look away. "You never disappointed me. You were the brightest thing in this whole place." Her heart trembled at his quiet sincerity. She didn't know how to respond, so she simply met his gaze with gentle understanding. Colt continued in a softer voice. "I was young too. I didn't know how to handle someone I cared about. I thought being strong for you meant pushing you. I didn't realize it only made you feel alone." Mara swallowed, her voice barely above a whisper. "You weren't unkind. You were just rough with the truth. And I didn't know how to handle that. Colt looked out at the horses again. Life was always rough around here. My father wasn't gentle. The weather wasn't gentle. The work wasn't gentle. I guess I thought the world had no room for softness. Mara took in his words, understanding him in a way she never had before. But you found softness anyway, she said. It's there in how you treat these animals. It's in the way you listen. It's in how you're speaking now. Colt blinked slowly, almost surprised by her observation. Maybe life teaches softness too, he said quietly. Just later, they stood together, watching the horses graze in the warm light. The silence between them wasn't heavy, like it had once been. It felt calm, reflective, like two old souls finally speaking a language they hadn't understood years ago. After a moment, Colt glanced down at her. You asked why I said people sometimes need things to be rough. Mara nodded, her expression attentive. I didn't mean it the way people think, Colt said softly. I just meant that life isn't always smooth. Sometimes we grow through storms, not sunshine. But that doesn't mean the storms should come from other people. I see that now. Mara's heart settled at his words, something deep inside her loosening. You're wiser than you think, Colt. He smiled gently. Only took me half a lifetime. They laughed softly together, the sound warm and natural. As the morning drifted into a golden afternoon, Mara felt a new sense of understanding settle quietly inside her. Colt wasn't a symbol of her past pain anymore. He was a person flawed, strong, gentle in his own way. Shaped by a life that taught him lessons differently. She understood now that the roughness he once spoke of wasn't meant to hurt her. It was simply the only language he knew at the time. And now, standing beside him, she saw that he had learned a new language too. One made of patience, calmness, and quiet honesty. Mara felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace, not because everything was resolved, but because understanding had replaced the confusion she once carried. And as the two of them walked back toward the ranch house, side by side under the soft sky, it felt like the beginning of a new chapter. One written not by the past, but by who they had become now. The next morning came with a soft, silver light spread across Dust Creek, as if the sky itself wanted to give Mara space to think. She woke slowly, feeling a mixture of calm and heaviness in her chest. The last few days had brought her closer to understanding pieces of her past she once ran away from. But deeper conversations still waited inside her heart. Conversations she had avoided for years because she didn't know how to express the things she never said. She knew today she needed to face them. Mara left the inn after breakfast, her steps steady but thoughtful. The town was waking up slowly. A few shopkeepers swept their porches. The smell of fresh bread drifted from the bakery. Dust Creek felt familiar and warm, but also like a place filled with stories she had forgotten to finish. She walked past the general store again, then toward the small church with its old white paint. Everything reminded her of the girl she once was, and the weight she carried back then. She reached the outskirts of town where the open fields stretched wide. Her heart pulled her toward the Avery Ranch, not because she wanted to dig up hurt, but because she needed to finally release it. She needed to open the chapters she had closed too quickly. When she arrived near the fence line, Colt was already there, leaning on a post with a faraway look in his eyes. He seemed deep in thought, the morning breeze gently lifting the edges of his shirt. He lifted his head when he heard her footsteps, and his expression softened immediately. "You're up early again," he said quietly. "So are you," she replied with a small smile. He nodded. "Couldn't sleep much. Too much on my mind." Mara's heart tightened slightly. She wondered if his thoughts were the same as hers. Unfinished conversations, old memories, hidden truths. She stepped closer, resting her hand lightly on the fence rail. "For the last few days," she began gently, "we've talked about the past. But there are still things we haven't said. Things we both avoided, Because they hurt. Colt didn't look surprised. Instead, he nodded slowly, his eyes thoughtful. You're right. We left too much unsaid back then. The wind moved quietly through the field, and Mara took a deep breath. She felt ready for this moment, not to blame him or herself, but to free both of them from what they never expressed. When I left Dust Creek, she said softly, I felt like I had failed. I felt like everything I tried to do wasn't enough. Not for myself, not for this place, and not for you. Colt's brow furrowed gently, concern filling his eyes. You didn't fail, Mara. I didn't know that, she whispered. Back then, I only saw the mistakes. I saw how uncertain I was about my future, and every time you tried to push me to be stronger, it felt like you were telling me I wasn't good enough. Colt's face shifted with understanding, and regret softened his features. I never meant it that way. I know, she said. But I didn't have the courage to tell you how I felt. Instead of talking, I ran away. Colt looked down at the ground, his voice low. I thought you left because I pushed too hard. Because I couldn't give you the kindness you needed. You gave me honesty, she said. And that mattered, but I wasn't ready to hear it. Colt's eyes rose slowly to meet hers. I wasn't ready to be gentle. The honesty in his answer touched her deeply. She moved a little closer to him, drawn not by old feelings but by the quiet understanding that had grown between them these last few days. There was a day, Mara continued, her voice softening, when everything fell apart inside me. I remember sitting by the fence near your barn, feeling like I couldn't breathe. I didn't tell you because I thought you'd tell me to toughen up. Colt's expression tightened with quiet pain. I wish you had told me. I would have listened. Even back then. I didn't know that, she said. I didn't know how to ask for help. I only knew how to hide. Known. Colt's shoulders lowered as if a weight had lifted from him. You were young. You shouldn't blame yourself. And you shouldn't blame yourself either, she added warmly. We were both trying to understand life. We just didn't know how to talk about it. Colt let out a slow breath, his eyes turning toward the horizon. My life was filled with hard lessons. My father believed softness made a person weak, so I tried to be strong all the time. I didn't realize that kind of strength can hurt people without meaning to. Mara felt her chest warm with empathy. You've grown from that, Colt. You're not the same person anymore. He glanced at her, a gentle honesty in his eyes. The truth of that filled the quiet between them with a comforting warmth. Mara no longer felt the old ache she once carried. Instead, she felt a sense of release, a sense that the past did not have to define them. She took another breath, steady and heartfelt. There's something else I need to say. Colt waited, patient and calm. I was angry with you for a long time, she admitted. Not because you were unkind, but because I thought you didn't understand me. I thought you expected me to be someone stronger, someone braver. Colt's voice came low and thoughtful. I didn't know how to show that I cared. I thought pushing you meant protecting you. Mara nodded. And I thought leaving meant freeing myself. Colt's eyes softened. Did it? She looked out across the field where the golden grass moved gently in the wind. Not really. I carried the past with me everywhere I went. I carried my fear, my hurt, my confusion. Leaving didn't make them go away. It just made me grow older, with unanswered questions. Colt stepped a little closer, his voice a quiet comfort. But you're here now. You came back to face it. Mara felt the truth of his words deep inside her. Yes. Because I didn't want the past to feel unfinished anymore. Colt nodded slowly. We can finish it now. We can make peace. A small smile formed on her lips. That's what I want. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence felt warm, like the soft spaces between heartbeats. The clouds drifted gently above them, casting slow-moving shadows across the field. The world felt simple, as if the only thing that mattered was the truth they were finally sharing. Colt looked toward the barn, then back at her, his voice calm and steady. Mara tilted her head gently. Like what? He took a small breath. I was scared too. Scared you'd leave. Scared I wasn't enough for you. Scared I'd disappoint you. Mara's eyes widened slightly. You? Scared? He gave a quiet laugh. Even the strongest people get scared. I just hid it better. She felt warmth spread through her chest at the honesty in his voice. I wish you had told me. No. 7011. I didn't know how, he admitted. But I know how now. Mara felt something shift inside her again, not a painful shift, but a gentle settling. Like a piece of her. Finally finding where it belonged. She understood now that Colt had carried his own burdens back then, even if he never showed them. Colt, she said softly, thank you. For telling me the truth. For listening. For being here now. He met her eyes with quiet warmth. Thank you for coming back. They stood together as the morning slipped toward afternoon, the sun growing warmer in the sky. The old wounds they once tiptoed around no longer felt sharp. They felt like memories, lessons that had shaped them, not chains that bound them. For the first time, Mara felt the past truly loosening its hold on her. She felt lighter, more present, more at peace. Understanding had eased the ache, and honesty had built a bridge between who they were and who they had become. As they walked back toward the ranch house together, Mara felt hopeful not for what might happen next, but for what had finally been healed. And for the first time in years, the past felt like a story she could close gently, without fear. The next morning came with a soft golden light spreading across Dust Creek, touching the ground like it was trying to heal everything it saw. Mara woke up with a strange mix of hope and uncertainty. She lay still for a while, thinking about everything she and Colt had said the night before. Their long talk had opened doors she thought she had closed forever. It also showed her how much pain she had carried alone. For the first time, she felt lighter, but she also felt afraid. Healing was new to her, and new things always made her anxious. She stepped outside the old guest cabin she was staying in and breathed in the cool morning air. The sky was clear, and the world seemed quieter than usual. Maybe it was just the peace inside her, or maybe Dust Creek truly felt different. She looked toward the Avery Ranch house. Smoke rose gently from the chimney, and the sound of horses moving echoed softly across the open land. Everything looked normal, almost too normal for a place where so many memories lived. Colt was already in the barn, brushing his horse. When he heard her footsteps, he turned around slowly, as if unsure whether she would want to talk again. Mara stopped a few feet away from him. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Colt gave a small, nervous smile. Something she had not seen from him before. It made him look human in a way she had never noticed, like someone who wasn't trying to be strong every second of the day. Mara stepped closer and gently touched the horse's neck. "Morning," she said softly. "Morning," Colt replied. His voice was calm, but she could tell his heart was racing a little. Last night had changed something between them, and they both felt it. They stood in quiet comfort for a moment. Dust danced in the sunlight. Somewhere outside, a bird called out. Then Colt said, "About yesterday. I just want you to know. I meant everything. I didn't say those things to make myself feel better. I said them because you deserved honesty." Mara looked at him. "I know. And I'm glad you said them," she answered. "I think I needed to hear the truth, even if it was hard." Colt put the brush down. "I don't want to repeat the mistakes I made in the past. If you stay in Dust Creek, or if you go back to your city life, I want you to leave knowing that." Mara took a slow breath. "I'm still thinking about staying or leaving. Part of me wants to run because it's easy, But another part of me feels like Dust Creek is the only place where I can face myself honestly. Colt stepped closer. Not too close. Just enough to show his sincerity. You don't have to decide right away. Just don't choose fear. His words were simple but powerful. Fear had guided so many of her decisions before: fear of failing, fear of being hurt, fear of being misunderstood. She didn't want fear to control her again. They walked outside the barn together, letting the sunlight wash over them. Colt offered to take her on a ride, to show her a place he often went when he needed clarity. Mara nodded, and soon they were riding side by side across the open fields. The horses moved steadily, their hooves making soft sounds in the dirt. Wind brushed Mara's face and gathered her hair. She felt free in a way she hadn't felt in years. Colt led her to a quiet hill overlooking the river. The water sparkled like a line of tiny stars, bending through the valley. Mara stopped her horse and stared at the view. It was peaceful and strong at the same time, just like the land and just like Colt, in a way she never fully understood before. This place helped me get through a lot, Colt said quietly. Whenever life felt too heavy, I came here. It reminded me that things keep moving, even when we feel stuck. Mara let the words settle in her heart. She climbed off her horse, and Colt did the same. They sat on the grass, watching the river wind its way through Dust Creek. Colt, she said gently, yesterday you asked me why I stayed away for so long. I think I finally know the answer. I wasn't just hurt by you. I was hurt by myself. I was afraid to admit that I wasn't as strong as I pretended to be. She paused. You pushed me because you believed I could be more than my fears. But I didn't believe that myself, back then. Colt's eyes softened. I never wanted to push you away. I just didn't know how to be gentle with someone I cared about. Mara looked at him with calm eyes. I know that now. And I'm not angry anymore. Wind rustled through the tall grass. Colt turned his gaze back to the river. Do you think we can start again? Not as who we were, but as who we are now. The question surprised her with its tenderness. This was not the same man she remembered. This was someone who had grown. Someone who understood himself better. She thought for a moment before answering. I think we can try, but slowly. Trust doesn't grow in a day. Colt nodded. Slow is fine. The rest of the day passed quietly. They talked about small things, work, plans, little memories from their childhoods. There was no tension, no rushing. Just a peaceful connection forming between them. It felt almost natural, as if life was giving them a second chance. Later that evening, as the sun lowered behind the hills, Colt walked Mara back to her cabin. The sky was painted with gentle shades of orange and purple. Crickets chirped in the distance. Mara felt calm, lighter than she had felt in years. Before she stepped inside, Colt stopped her gently with a soft, hesitant voice. Mara, he said, whatever you decide whether you stay or go, I want you to know that you changed me. You taught me how to look at myself honestly. And that means more than anything. Mara felt her eyes warm, not with sadness but with gratitude. And you helped me remember who I really am, she replied. Not someone broken. Someone stronger. They shared a long, peaceful silence. Then Mara smiled a small, warm smile that came from a place deep inside her. I'll let you know my decision soon, she said. Colt nodded. Take all the time you need. She stepped into the cabin, closing the door gently behind her. But instead of feeling alone, she felt comfort surround her. She sat by the window, watching the last bit of sunlight fade. For the first time in years, she felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. Dust Creek was not just a place filled with old pain. It was also a place filled with possibility. Colt was not just part of her past. He was someone who might belong in her future. And Mara realized that healing did not mean forgetting everything that hurt it, meant facing those things and choosing a new path. She took a deep breath and smiled to herself. Tomorrow, she would decide what came next. But tonight, she allowed herself to feel hope. A soft, steady hope that warmed her heart and promised that no matter what she chose, she was stronger than before. And that strength would guide her to wherever she truly belonged.